So now that our validator class is ready, it's time to write some rules that this validator will use later on to validate given rules of on the input. Okay, so inside of the rules directory, let's create the abstract class called rule, which is going to be acting as a parent class for all rules for the validator. And this one is going to be within the namespace up. Then we have utilities, then we have validator and rules. Okay, and let's just remove these spaces and then abstract rule. And we're going to start with the protected input, which is going to be the instance of the collection again, and it's Illuminate support collection. So make sure that you import it here at the top as well. Then we have protected key, which is going to be of a string type. And after the key, we have protected parameters. And that's going to be also of the, actually this one is going to be null or a collection. And let's just create, and I'm again going to create a few new lines so we can see things better. Let's create the constructor, and constructor will take all three of these and associate them with our properties. Now the collection is the first one, key and parameters. And if we go open our validator, if we scroll right to the bottom, you may remember here we instantiating this class, this given rule, and then we call validate method on it. So we pass in this input, which has been passed through to this validator class as the second argument. We then associating this with the input property, which is obviously of the collection type. Then the key, in our case, it might be any of the field names of the form, and then parameters, which might be either null or anything that's been after the colon for a given rule. Okay, so this is what we're passing here. We associated this with our properties, and the next method we're going to have is going to be called private function process parameters, and we're going to take parameters through as by default null. And actually here we're not associating anything yet. We are going to actually make call to this process parameters and pass parameters as argument, because from within this process parameters is when we're actually going to associate them with this property. So what we're going to start with is check if is null parameters, then all we need to do is simply return, and that's this method done. Nothing else is going to be executed. If it isn't null, then we're going to do this parameters equals, and we start with a new collection, this support collection, Illuminate support collection, and we pass the explode function to it. We divide all these parameters with comma, because these parameters after, let's say again, let's have a look at what we might have there. So let's say required, sorry, not like this, not required. It would be, for instance, exists. Then we have this colon, and then we have within the table, say users, and then all these additional items would be separated by comma. So for instance, ID is something and so on. So this is where we're exploding this part, which has been passed through as parameters with this comma. So we're generating the array basically. So let's forget about this exists for now. So now we would have an array of users and ID, for instance, users and ID. That's what would happen after we explode it with this comma. And we're obviously generating the new collection because of this, as passing this whatever this explode is going to output, and then parameters a second argument to this explode, obviously because we need this string which we're going to explode with this comma. And after this, what we're going to do is call the map method, which is going to use the trim function for all of these items. So basically each item within this parameter string, once it's converted to an array, so let's say we're going to have an array of something, say users, then ID, we want to make sure that each of these parameters is trimmed, because there might be some space as well. We might have had a string like users, for instance, then comma and space ID. So we need to make sure that obviously these spaces are removed, because otherwise we're going to have this item in the array with the space as well. So each of these items we are trimming using the trim function, using this basically map method on this collection. And again, I'm inlining here rather than doing this as, for instance, creating the variable, then associating new collections. So I'm inlining everything, but we could also do it this way, for instance. So let's just, perhaps if we do it this way, it's going to be a little bit easier to understand. So we have, say, parameter equals, now exploding them first. So you're basically overwriting the string with the array now, and then create new collection. So it would be collection equals new collection, and we pass this parameters through as an argument, and then on this collection we run this map method, and we say that we want to use the standard PHP trim function to remove any basically white space, any spaces from the beginning and the end of the string, and then we associate it with the parameters. I think this makes it a little bit clear here. Okay, so that's everything from within the process parameters. So let's add the dog block to this method as well. Returns parameters null, or it might also be a string. And then process parameters for the summary. Okay, and the last thing we need to do is to declare abstract function called validate, because as you may remember, we are calling this validate method on this new instance of this role class. Obviously, role class will be one of those subclasses that actually extend this main abstract role class. So abstract public function validate, and this is a contract that every child needs to adhere to. So they have to have this method within them, and it's going to return Boolean, true or false, because it's just basically going to evaluate given condition to make sure that the value associated with the given field, basically representing a given rule, is valid. So validate input for the summary, and let's remove this redundant space again, and we can save it, and we can close this file for now. Next, we are going to create a confirmed. We're going to start with a confirmed rule. Confirmed. So things like, for instance, when we have a password, when for the registration, especially when you have a password, you have to also have another field, confirm password. For instance, this is when we're going to compare whether two input values are the same. So confirmed extends rule, and obviously make sure that we are in the correct namespace. It's app utilities validator rules, and it needs to be obviously within this directory here as well. And we have this red line because we haven't got this contract implemented yet. So now we've added this public function validate, and this validate method we're going to start with confirmation equals this key, and then concatenate it with underscore confirmation. So let me just explain what this does. If we had, say, password field in our form, then we would also have to have password confirmation field, because this confirmed method, this confirmed class rule will ensure that we also have this other field. When we associate this confirmed rule with the password field, this confirmed rule will check whether there is a password confirmation field, and obviously if the values of both are matching. So here we're going to return, and in between the brackets, because we're going to have more than one statement, this input, and we are looking for, basically first we need to check if it has the item called confirmation, basically in our case, whatever this key is going to represent, because it doesn't have to be password, it might be, for instance, email confirmation, and so on. So whatever this string here returns, combined basically a key combined with this underscore confirmation. So does it have this sort of field with this name? And then also, so double and symbol, this input, and then we're looking for this key. So this key equals this input and this confirmation key. So basically both values. So if we, again, I'm going to use this password as an example here, and let me just put it actually lower here so we can see a little bit better. Okay, so we have, say, password field, input with the password as a name attribute, and then password confirmation. So it checks whether the value associated with this password field here, because the key would be password, and then value associated with the password confirmation are the same. So whatever these input store, they have to have the same value. Basically, this confirmed. We'll check that the field with this name also exists within the request, and then that values for both are the same. And that's everything for this confirmed rule. Let's now create another one, the one for email. So class email, and again this one also extends the rule class, so extends rule, and let's add this method stub here. And validate method here will simply use return statement with filter var, and we go for this input, we get this key, and then the flag that we want to use is going to be the constant filter validate email. Basically, this filter var, we're telling it that we want to validate the given string that we're passing through as the first argument using this filter validate email, which checks for a valid email address. So it will tell us whether this string evaluates as valid email address, basically. Okay, that's everything for our email rule. And the last rule we are going to use with our exercise is going to be required, just to check whether the field is empty. So required, hit return, there we go, remove the space, extend rule, add the method stub, and here we're going to return isn't empty this input, and then the field that we are looking for is going to be within this key. And that's all. We're just checking if the input with this name, wherever this property will store, isn't empty. So if it's required, it needs to have some value. And that's it. So if we save it, close it, we can also close this validator, and we are now done with our validator component. Obviously, you can add more rules if you want to check whether the record exists in a table and so on. It's entirely up to you. You can create as many as you want. You've got, obviously, here this composition. You've got validator, which where you're passing everything through, and then these rules are going to be picked based on what collection you go into, what rules are you going to pass through as arguments to this validator constructor. Okay, so in the next video, again, we are going to write some tests to make sure that our validator component works as expected.